Ah, yes, the dungeon. A staple of not only MMOs, but of also really any game or popular adventure-based media. I don't know if you've heard, but in Final Fantasy XIV, we got dungeons. Lots of dungeons. In fact, at the time of writing this, there are 88 dungeons in the game. But what makes a dungeon good? Could it be the presentation, the mechanics, maybe the enemies? In A Realm Reborn, the dungeons tended to have more small mechanics that impeded your path forward. Or at least they did before they got reworked. Look at Sastasha, for example. You know, the first and most simple dungeon. You get to the stopping point and, huh? What? There's 3 doors, which one is real? Now, if you read the note earlier in the dungeon, which was entirely optional, you know to click on this one. But even if you click on the wrong one, you just have to fight a few extra dudes and then you're on your way. Fast forward to Endwalker's dungeon design, and oftentimes there is no stopping. You know, you fight 2 mob packs, kill a boss, you rinse, you repeat a couple times, you made your way through. Is this worse? I don't know. It kind of sounds worse, but you need the full picture to understand what's going on here. You know, I argue that these new dungeons aren't any better or worse than old school dungeons, but they're a byproduct of how refined and streamlined Final Fantasy XIV has become. Especially with the end of expansion dungeons that show up in expert roulettes. Nobody wants to be stuck in these dungeons, especially not for a prolonged period of time. So it makes sense that the developers have streamlined them from, you know, a gameplay and function standpoint. Why has it gotten to this point? Well, let's take a look at some of Final Fantasy XIV's least beloved dungeons. From there, we can figure out the feedback Square got from the player base to exactly what they're trying to avoid in modern dungeons. So the Arm Veil, you know, it feels to me like this dungeon is disliked and amended by players because, you know, maybe it's because it forces you to do certain things that slow you down. You know, for example, the stacking debuffs you get. If you let them stack up, the damage over time will suck away at your health like a cat boy in the quicksands. So you got to stop hitting the boss. You know, walk all the way over to one of the little fruits and eat it before continuing to fight the boss. This, compounded with relative lack of healing spells that healers have access to, kind of makes it so you can't just plow your way through, you know, and it kind of bugs people. But not everyone. I mean, if your party's good enough, you can kind of just ignore the mechanic altogether. You can kill a boss, you know, with good damage, smart mitigation, and timely healing. Don't get me wrong, like, you don't need to be that good to do this, but it does create separation from first-timer sprouts and somewhat competent leveling rouletters. Do we care about that small form of skill expression? Well, I personally do, because, you know, it makes me feel like I've grown on my journey through Final Fantasy XIV. I used to be that stupid baby loser sprout. Now I'm a Giga Chad Arm Veil clearer. This is just a small example, you know, a snapshot of how older dungeons and their weird mechanics had more of a learning curve. I mean, think of how many times in Hawk Manor we had to tell new players to slash return before the final boss. Now you just walk forward and hit a button. Ultimately, yeah, it's probably not that big a deal, but I like the stupid little small quirks these dungeons used to have. It really made me feel like I was Final Fantasy XIV. Without the silly quirks differentiating these dungeons from each other, it can just feel like funnels. You walk through and get tomes instead of, well, dungeons. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to spend 40 minutes on an expert roulette when I just want to farm towards the grossly low 450 weekly tome cap. When all you need are the tomes, a quick 10-minute get in, kill the guys, get out job is perfect. And that's why I think dungeons have evolved in such a way. Square has a tendency to want to play it safe with their design. They don't want to rock the boat. You know, they don't want to confuse new players or slow down endgame players. You can see examples of this all throughout the design of the Endwalker era of Final Fantasy XIV. Just look how streamlined the jobs are. Look at how all you need for relic steps this time are a bag of tomes and a skip cutscene button. So, what's an example of a good dungeon? Or even the best dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV? Talk about my favorite dungeon in the game, the Twinning. First off, presentation is incredible. The environment, the music, the bosses, it's got it all. It also has the aforementioned skill expression, but it doesn't slow you down. If dungeons like the old Aram Vale or Copperbell Mines are a syrupy dungeoning slog, then the Twinning is a sleek and speedy roller coaster fueled by electricity and excitement. The Twinning doesn't sacrifice its fun little quirks though. For example, some of the mobs have tank busters, which paired with a couple big pull opportunities makes those instances more unique. More satisfying for sure than a regular mob pull. First boss can be quickly dealt with from an experienced party, but your party doesn't know to point the sword away from the cages, while your tank will be in for a fun time. Also, the final boss is Alexander, so you know this shit slaps. Basically, this dungeon rocks. It's like lightning in a bottle that I really hope Square hasn't lost. We know they're still capable of creating great atmosphere, presentation, but I think they need to remember the small quirks in gameplay that make dungeons like the Twinning so special. I hope they can remember it's okay to give mobs some little mechanics. It's okay to punish players with something other than a Vuln stack or a damage down. I think adding fun little stuff to the combat without forcing players to stop in their tracks is the way forward with dungeon design. But some of these Endwalker era dungeons just feel soulless, man. Like, I'm not trying to dwell on it, but what's even going on in the Fell Court of Troya, this 6.2 dungeon? To me, it feels so incredibly formulaic. I'd rather beg on the streets of Ul'dah for tomes. Or worse, do hunt trains. New dungeons aren't all bad, mind you. There are at least parts of the newer dungeons that can be fun. I like Cagnazzo's voice lines or the spinny mechanic in Azul'dal's Legacy. Stuff like this just feels so sparsely spread around. Like, come on, Papa Yoshi. Where's the sauce, my guy? We need more sauce. Ultimately, I think 14's dungeon design is going to continue down this path. I hope that we get a few fun gems here or there, because right now, feels like the dungeons are a bit of an afterthought. With a few tweaks, the Endwalker dungeons could have been way more memorable. So I don't want to lose faith in the team. Square doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. They just need to make better dungeons. Thanks for watching. Have a good day, life, whatever. I'll see you next time.